2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are going to be continuing Dane's rampage of a birthday treatment. As we go into a particular film that is in the realm of Kotobuki Jake's expertise. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this film that we watched for Dane's extravaganza?
I'll show you the life of the mind.
Yeah.
So yes, Dane has kindly selected for us a classic film from the brothers Coen, Barton Fink, and yeah, I really feel like, Dane, I think you should definitely do the intro here. And like I said, if you want me to help out, I can. But definitely, this is your intro.
You can tag team it, or just anybody that wants to jump in. I mean, that's I tend to think that's how these things go the best. But anyway, so this is a 1991 film by the Coen Brothers, starring John Turturro and John Goodman, two Coen Brothers regulars, as well as Steve Buscemi and a lot of bit players here and there. And it is about a playwright named Barton Fink, who is hired based on the success of his latest Broadway play to become a screenwriter, which was a common thing back in the early 1940s when the film is set. I believe 1941. Yep. So it goes out to LA to become a screenwriter and stays at a very Kubrickian kind of hotel, very creepy. And he encounters his next door neighbor named Charlie Meadows, or at least we think that's his name. And it's all about his attempts to get the damn screenplay written amidst all of the Coen Brothers wackiness that occurs, that vacillates between the buddy comedy, the horror film, the Hollywood satire, the neo-noir mystery, the what the fuck. It's such a great film because it defies genre and categorization, which is part of why I wanted to talk about it during my birthday selections, because when in the hell else are we going to be able to talk about a film like this that goes out of its way to defy genre so beautifully? It won 3 awards at the Cannes Film Festival, including the Palme d'Or. And after that, the Cannes Film Festival actually limited the maximum number of awards that a particular film could win to 2, because they didn't want to have an Oscar situation where, something could just dominate. But yeah, we
were talking about Return of the King in the last episode.
Exactly. But it won for it won the Palme d'Or, and it won John Turturro won Best Actor, and I think one of the Coens, forget if it was directing or writing, one of those. But anyway, it was a kind of a big deal in the art house circuit. Didn't do jack shit commercially, and but it has gone on to be very well regarded amongst film scholars and fans of the Coen Brothers' work. And it is one of the, I think, best films about a part of the filmmaking process. I was going to say a film about filmmaking as a whole, which you could technically throw it in there. It's specifically about the process of screenwriting. So it's a process. But yeah, it's a movie that really is kind of its own animal, and that's why I selected it, because I try to be my own animal.
And specifically, it's a film about writer's block, which is the the Coen brothers have stated that they wrote the film in a fit of writer's block when they were trying to hammer out a screenplay for Miller's Crossing, which is a wonderful film that is also underrated. Mm-hmm. They took a break and wrote this and ended up filming the two back to back and releasing this the year after Crossing. So that was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And for my part, I wanted to mention as well that this is a good, you mentioned Kubrickian, there's some obvious nods to The Shining and the Hotel Earl. And there's also some nods to a lot of other stuff. Notably, for my birthday selections, we paired the Coen Brothers, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with Sullivan's Travels, the 1941 Preston Sturges film. And I fully believe this is their version of a nightmare take on Sullivan's Travels. Mm-hmm. Like basically Sullivan's Travels, if you watch the episode, but it's basically you watch this Hollywood director who flush off a series of great films, or maybe not great, but popular films, decides he wants to do a magnum opus for the common man, and sets out to do research to make Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And in the film, he eventually learns the valuable life lessons and decides not to make the film. Eventually, the Cullen brothers made that film. But in this one, Barton Fink doesn't learn a lesson.
Well, he's kind of the exact opposite, where he kind of thinks that he knows that he's in touch with the common man through his play, and yet he's totally a New York intelligentsia member. Right. It's a beautiful piece of satire, as well as I think pretty creepy horror film in many ways. You know,
they really do kind of. You're right. He is almost the reverse. Like Sullivan went out of his way. He put himself into harm's way against the advice of everyone around him, open to new ideas, open to learning, opening to everything. He knew he needed to learn. And Fink is the opposite. And one of my favorite parts in this is how, when in his interactions with Charlie Meadows, one of the refrains that Goodman has repeatedly, John Goodman as Meadows, says, "I could tell you some stories." And he, every time Turturro starts spouting off some pontification, yes, you could, and that is your right, and you see John Goodman just clam right up, and you see him shooting daggers at. It's one of the only times you see him angry in the movie is when he gets cut off like that, and
shooting daggers while trying to be John Goodman friendly, salesman. Was it life insurance that he sells?
Yes.
Door to door.
Well, that's what he claims to sell. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's actually echoes of his character in his character in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where he introduces himself as Big Dan and starts talking about selling peace of mind, and there's a lot of similarities in those, but this was I still this say is one of Goodman's best roles, but right.
I wonder. The Coen Brothers give him all his good roles, his really good roles.
Well, I wouldn't say all of them. He was phenomenal in 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Oh yeah,
and he was phenomenal in Flight. I thought he did a great job in Flight. He's had a couple really good ones.
Even in Kong Skull Island, he was good.
Yeah. Well, he's just a damn good actor. He's overdue. He's overdue for Oscar love. But anyway, so shall we go ahead and I guess you've kind of covered the plot for the most part. You basically the plot's pretty straightforward.
Kind of, but it's also hard to sum up quickly because it's so kind of tonally bizarre, because it is it has one foot in dark comedy, another one in horror, another one in buddy comedy. It's all kinds of stuff, but that's precisely why I like it, because another common theme of mine for some of my favorite movies is I love movies that have a little bit of everything in them.
Right.
And, in this case, this is a movie that really does defy genre. But again, life is like that. Life is horrific and hilarious and dramatic and romantic and this and that all at the same time. And this film definitely shows that well. I know for myself, I saw this film back in college because it was a film that was required viewing for my history of American screenwriting class. So we
Cool.
actually had quite a few films that we watched. And my professor was Dana Cohen, who wrote a lot of episodes for JAG. He wrote. He was a producer on the first season of Bones. He wrote a lot of in his early days. He wrote a lot of sitcom stuff for television. But has a pretty accomplished IMDb. But his whole big thing was to get us exposed to great cinema from all different eras and to understand the evolution of screenwriting as a craft, the role of the screenwriter in the filmmaking process, all that stuff, and how it was specifically shaped by the experiences of the Jewish German immigrant families that came over to found many of the studios that we know and love, like Warner Brothers and things like that. And just the evolution of how the screenwriting form evolved and everything, and the fact that as the studio system got more established, that a lot of playwrights, which obviously the stage was by far and away the more prestigious artistic avenue, and was more regularly attended for much of early cinema's history. Cinema began as kind of this kind of carny sideshow attraction, and then eventually got more and more prestige and more popular entertainment consumption, and then was more respected as its own art form, etc. But yeah, I watched it as part of all that study, particularly because it is so heavily rooted in its time and place. And it went along with one of the other. I'm thinking this was like mid-semester assignment. It was this film and In a Lonely Place from 1950 by Nicholas Ray, starring Humphrey Bogart as a screenwriter, and that was a film noir made during the 40s 50s, when film noir was very much in vogue. And then this is kind of neo noir and made in 91 but set in 1941. So you kind of got the gamut covered. But that was when I first saw it, and when I did see it, it really blew me away, as far as, because I obviously love the Coen Brothers' other work. This is by far my favorite of theirs because of how much it really is its own animal, how much it is able to blend different genres together and that sort of thing. And also, I love the fact that it has probably the most in common with a horror film that they've ever done, but also it just has so many different layers to it that if we wanted to, we could dedicate like 6 hours to dissect each and every little thing. There's so much in it.
One could say that about most of theirs.
Yeah, you really could. So we have to kind of have a little bit more of a cursory glance at this to keep it all moving. But those were some of my first impressions with it, while also setting some of the historical context for the film.
All right. Strictly speaking, Joel Coen has done a deep dive in the horror genre, since his first credit was a editor on The Evil Dead. But
That's right.
So, Brandon, why don't you throw your first impression out?
Well, I don't even remember if I actually said this before, But we've talked about people introducing people to directors and films. I know that Jake and I have introduced each other to a lot of these type of films, and for the Coens, that would be Jake introducing me to the Coens, for better or for worse, depending on.
You know
Depending
you
on.
love a serious man.
Oh, I love.
Oh yeah. Oh good God. Yeah, one of the.
Hey, it all comes
really.
back to Job or sex.
Well,
Oh, it
this
truly
actually
comes
has
back
a
to
lot-
Job there.
It does. Well, and
And
actually, Barton Fink has a lot to do with Job too.
Yes, it does.
mhm. So he had introduced me to a lot of these. So I got curious about it because I was introduced. He introduced me to "O Brother, Where Art Thou," which is probably the best movie. One of the best movies. Maybe not the best, but definitely one of the best ones to introduce a newbie to the Coen Brothers,
Right.
because
Uh-huh.
it is artsy, but it's highly enjoyable. It's not overly harsh. The Job tone is there, like it is in all their stuff, but it's not hit you over the head, like say, like if my first ever experience with the Coens was A Serious Man, and Jake was like, yeah, this is what they're all like. I would be like, well, you enjoy that stuff. That's not for me. So I got a Coen Brothers box set, back in back earlier on, back when Plan 9 was still pretty big. They had their cool basement
Right.
stuff, and they had this Coen Brothers set marked down to very low. I think like $10, and I was like, this is cool. It has a lot of the major movies in it that I've not seen. And I had to get it. And so that's how I watched Barton Fink originally. And I watched it in a pathetic way on a pathetic little screen. I don't know where, but I know I was like trapped in an area that I first watched it in this little area, like closet like area. So in a way, it was probably the perfect venue to watch this film. And it definitely, that one and the Hudsucker Proxy are probably my two favorite of the Coen films. For kids. It just is interesting, the dark tones of it, the amazing performance by John Goodman, the way that it looks at itself, and after seeing Sullivan's Travels, I can definitely see the parallels, which is really cool. And that ending, oh good God, that ending is depressing. And so watching it again, it was kind of cool. I got to see it on a slightly bigger screen, still a smaller screen because I didn't see it in the big TV. But it was still an enjoyable experience. I really liked plowing through it again, and in truth, it still is probably my second favorite Coen film. So.
It's interesting. The Hudsucker Proxy was also one that had a strong attachment to Preston Sturges, because I really feel like that was their first attempt to make a Sturges-style screwball comedy. Like I felt like Raising Arizona was a little bit more of its own thing. Like it had a Sturges flavor, but with Proxy, I felt like they were really going for it. Yeah, it was an interesting movie. It was not. It was good times. We'll have to do that one eventually, if only so the audience can understand our, for kids thing.
Yeah.
But
I mean that was one of the more memorable bits that the Nostalgia Critic had. It's funny that so the Hudsucker Proxy actually they did that with Sam Raimi directly, if I recall. Because their filmmaking history crosses over quite a lot with Sam Raimi's, obviously. And also it's funny we talk about for kids, because I did see Oh Brother Where Art Thou when I was a kid, because that was like a new release movie in 2000, and I saw it on VHS, and well, it was a PG movie, and it was artsy, and yet it was mainstream, and yet it was, you know, all these things. And I just remember the big impact there was the album of the year winning soundtrack, you know, which had all the bluegrass and everything, and you know, all that stuff. So it was kind of a big deal of a movie. But
I was really into country at the time, and that soundtrack dominated the country charts for a while. And but it did really good on the pop charts too, and it's one of the top selling soundtracks of all time. It's you know, it's just you know, for good reason. But as far as my initial intro, I've talked about this a little bit in the intro to Oh Brother Where Art Thou and Raising Arizona. I was introduced to the Coens by a friend at the time in college who sat several of us down one night and showed us Raising Arizona and said this was his favorite movie. And we watched it, and I was like, I like this movie. And I went and I probably saw Fargo within a couple weeks. I can't remember, but I know I saw it quickly. And that was around the time Oh Brother hit theaters. And as I think I've said before, I had to wait because where I was, it didn't come right away. It came like 3 or 4 weeks later, if that. And I actually drove 45 minutes to the next college town to see it. And then the week later, it came to Roanoke. No, that was kind of annoying. But and I ended up actually getting it on DVD and then going to see it in theaters again. It was the first movie I saw in theaters, I think, after owning a copy. I think. And I saw it paired with Chocolat, which was just a great night at the movies. So that was good times. But as far as in the interim, I know in that general time frame, I did see Miller's Crossing, The Big Lebowski, The Hudsucker Proxy, and Barton Fink, and Blood Simple. But I don't know what order they came in. I cannot remember that well. I just know that I saw them all in short order. And I definitely went out to see The Man Who Wasn't There when it came out. And, you know, I've mostly been on top of their stuff since then. But my initial reactions to all of the films were positive. Hudsucker Proxy was the weakest one in my book until The Lady Killers came out. And I still think they're all decent. Even The Lady Killers is a decent movie. But Barton Fink was one that my initial reaction was, I don't think I really knew what to make of it. I liked it. I thought it was suitably strange. I loved the performances. From the get-go, I thought John Turturro and John Goodman were phenomenal in their roles. I'm also a big Frasier fan, and John Mahoney's performance was quite enjoyable. Incidentally, he had a small role in Hudsucker Proxy as well, so he had a nice little relationship with the Coens for a bit. And Michael Lerner, I also knew from television because I actually watched the Clueless series when it was on the air. And, you know, he played Cher's father in that series, and I'm waiting for that to get a physical release. I wouldn't mind picking it up. But it's...
You'd have to be Methuselah to be Cher's father.
The other Cher. But anyway, it's a good movie. It's you're right. It's kind of hard to pigeonhole to genre. It really does kind of tick a bunch of different boxes, and it's extraordinarily well written. It is well acted. It does do a great job giving you that sort of sense of claustrophobic doom, really, that the character is under. Because I don't think you really said explicitly, he is brought out to Hollywood and slapped on a Wallace Beery wrestling pick.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy wouldn't know wrestling if it hit him ass.
Well, it's funny because it is essentially what the movie is supposed to write.
Right.
I don't think they had the term B movie yet. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But by all accounts, it is that, and yet
Right.
it's and just also for historical context. So the studio for whom he is supposed to write, because again, this was like old Hollywood. This was the studio system where the studios they hired out and owned essentially their own stars and writers and everything, and they did not like to help out the competition. But there's a reason why, Humphrey Bogart, was in all the a bunch of Warner Brothers stuff because he was under contract to Warner for a long time. That's how it was. And then of course the system changed to where, directors and actors, they got represented by agents and they could go, and managers, and they could go and work for whoever, SAG and all that stuff. But he goes out to work for Capitol Pictures, and it is Jack Lipnick, who is the studio head, who is essentially a big satire of Louis B. Mayer and other, really eccentric studio heads of the time who were, he specifically mentions the old country because they were all pretty much immigrants from, I believe, Germany, and they were, all Jewish, and so they make a point of referencing both the immigrant thing and the, he's don't take me out of context here, but his quote is that he's louder and meaner and nastier than any other kike in this town, and so that's exactly, which that's a term that's thrown around quite a lot in terms of like who is saying it about themselves and also who is saying it about people who are not themselves, so it's there's a lot of references to the anti-Semitism of the period, but also the fact that within the Hollywood of the period, that it was becoming a place where these otherwise oppressed people could go and kind of create their own world, their own business and everything, because there's the kind of anti-Semitic slur that the Jews run entertainment, run Hollywood, blah blah blah. Well, historically there is a truth to that in the sense of the kind of foundational aspects. It's not the Zionist sinister version of it that phrase evokes, but it is nonetheless an important part of Hollywood's history and of Jack Lipnick and of Barton Fink and the whole setting at the period. But he goes there to the studio to write this wrestling picture, and he has no fucking clue what he's going to write about, as you said. And yet, Jack Lipnick is one of those people that talks a lot and hears very little. And if he does hear anything, it's pretty much what he wants to hear. And he's a incredibly funny character, and Michael Lerner as an actor is one of the unsung heroes of the acting world, I think, because he's such a memorable bit player and a Coen Brothers regular, if I recall, along with what was his assistant's name? Lou? John Polito.
Well, John Polito, definitely. He's been in a bunch of Coen stuff.
He was a brother Seamus in the Big Lebowski.
Big Lebowski, and he was in The Man Who Wasn't There, and I won't say he was in Hudsucker, but definitely in Miller's Crossing. He was a major character in that one.
And
Lipnick did-
early performance from our dear Tony Shalhoub also.
Right. He had a pretty good line where
Never make Mr. Lipnick like you. He has taken an interest.
Yes, there was that one, but there was the part where he plays the guy, Ben Geisler, who's the producer on the pick and doesn't even know it until Fink comes in and talks to him, and then he's like, "You need guidance? Talk to another writer." Who? Jesus, throw a rock in here. You'll hit one. And do me a favor, Fink. Throw it hard.
And the funny part is that is true, though. People in there's a line from another movie. Can't remember what the name of it is. I think it's one that Alec Baldwin is in, but the woman's basically saying, just essentially that same thing. Talk to the the pool boy, the this or that. They've all got him. You just got to find one.
Right. Well, and then Lipnick had one of my favorite lines, which I put up on our message feed or something like that, which was like, we want that something like he said something to the effect of, we want this pick to have the Barton Fink feeling. And if you're Barton Fink, I figure you got it in spades.
Love it.
But that's one of the good things. It's like I really liked the idea. This was where they were definitely satirizing the shallowness of people who will buy a brand or whatever. It's like they wants that Barton Fink feeling, but you never really find out exactly what he thinks that is. And it's pretty clear when he finally gets the script from Fink that they have different ideas about what that is. But anyway, Dave's back with us. Are you back?
Yes, I am.
Did you want to give your first impression?
Well, my first impression comes from I'd seen bits and pieces of this film, but I did not know what it was when I was watching it. So I guess you could say that my first viewing of it in its entirety was recently, and I liked it. Because Jake's been with us for quite some time. I've been introduced to a lot of the Coen Brothers stuff, but I also remember my high school music teacher talking about, "Oh brother, where art thou?" And he wanted us to do some songs from that as well. So, being said, John Turturro, he gets a lot of side characters over his filmography, doesn't he? And for having a film be where he's like the central character is a little bit different too, and seeing that he is this almost like closet screenwriter who has one claim to fame that brings him to Hollywood, and it's like seeing him start to socialize and things of that nature in the film. That part I can relate to, especially when you're your first time on a high school campus, or first time on a high school campus. You're always nervous, about meeting new people and figuring out exactly who you can get along with and who you can't. And I like that jitteriness about John Turturro's character in here. He's kind of a nervous Nilly. So
definitely. Well, and that's also exacerbated by the fact that this is not anything new whatsoever, but it's a very, very common point of comparison, just how different New York City is from LA. In a whole bunch of ways. New York City is very concentrated and centralized. LA is very spread out and has only gotten more so since 1941. And there's not a lot of common experiences. It gets, New York's very gritty and real, and LA is very shallow, superficial, blah blah blah. You got someone coming from this very particular place going to the complete opposite coast, and not only is there a big culture shock, but also he's staying in the Hotel Earl, which is a creepy as fuck hotel. Because it's
Oh, yeah.
basically coming apart at the seams, and it's got it just looks creepy and it feels weird, and it's
not to
got a lot
mention
of good.
well, not to mention the passive aggressive bellhop.
Yeah, my name is Chet. Yeah, played
Chet.
by the
He writes it down.
played by the inimitable Steve Buscemi,
Right.
who I love.
Oh, yeah.
Another Coen Brothers regular.
One of the only two Coen Brothers films, and we really don't know what happens to him in this one, but this one and the Hudsucker Proxy, the only ones where he is not either obviously killed or beaten up.
I like how he just comes up from the floor, just like
Yeah.
this like trap door just opens and boom, he's out.
Well, there's a lot of, I think, pretty important symbolism to the Hotel Earl itself, which I think it's not too much of a stretch to say this. This isn't exactly a brain buster, but I think it's pretty clear that the hotel itself gets more and more hellish over time. So you've got, this bellhop who emerges from underground, coming up. You've got, he's just kind of a weirdo, and he's doing a lot of, like they shine the shoes, and so you see all this line of shoes outside of this hotel where it seems like only two people are really residing, even though the shoes would, lead us to believe that there are other people staying there, but we never see anybody other than Barton Fink and Charlie Meadows staying there.
They do make reference to apparently a couple knocking boots, as it were.
Yeah, they make reference to it, but it's just but you don't really see anyone else, but you hear them getting up to all kinds of naughty business, or like you hear crying and wailing and gnashing of teeth and that sort of thing. You hear all of that. You get the sense that the hotel walls are almost like closing in on Barton Fink, plus the wallpaper is peeling off the walls, and it's so gross looking because it looks like flesh. It looks like flesh, and it gets unbelievably hot all the way through. You've got mosquitoes, which aren't native to a dry climate like LA, and they're attracted to heat and warmth and moisture. So again, that's kind of this unnatural time, this unnatural place, and with unnatural rules. And then of course, Charlie Meadows, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but once the hotel is literally on fire, he is seemingly unaffected by it, and he seems to in fact be in total control of this particular realm. And so you could easily read it as him being like the devil. And
well, he is affected by the heat. You hear him always complaining about it, but
the heat, yes, but not so much the actual flames themselves. Because even the devil can complain about how hot it is, but still be the ruler of his little realm, And
it is notable that the paper almost always starts peeling after Meadows has left the room, and not at any other time. So that's kind of fun. So, Dave, did you finish your thoughts, or did we? Are we?
Well, I guess I could touch on the character of the Hollywood Capitol Pictures dude.
He's a reason for Barton to be a little bit nervous.
Yeah, no shit. He would make me nervous.
I mean, he and oh my God, young Tony Shalhoub. Role is that sleazy editor or whatever, but the character of the Capitol Records manager. He comes off to me as like a total kiss asser when it comes to new people and people that he likes really well. And he's kind of the representation of your typical Hollywood manager of a studio. I mean, if you're hot and you're doing things good for his studio, then he's pleased with you as long as you pull out a story out of your hat. He's fine with it, as long as it makes him money and you keep him happy, everything's kosher.
Yeah.
But if you can't sell a story to even him, then you're on the other side of the spectrum. Then you get his vile hatred, and that's the kind of character that you're kind of dealing with here. And you can tell that he has a devotion to John Turturro's character here as Barton Fink, because he really liked, evidently, his screenplay that he did before. So,
well, as I said, I didn't read it, but Lou read it, and he said,
"Yeah, I think it's more of the idea of it,
right?"
And
the
guy really,
I
mean, he represents everything that is probably bad about old or current Hollywood. Which you get to see a lot more at the end than during that. That ending really does show a lot of the frustration that most filmmakers and writers must feel when it comes to that. But I'm sure we'll touch on that.
Especially,
I would hope we touch on that one.
Especially when you're working for a major studio, a major studio is totally different than working independently. For sure.
Imagine being a comic book fan and making an X-Men movie for Fox.
Well, and again, this is illustrated in the film as well, not just by the ending, but also by the John Mahoney character, W.P. Mayhew, and his assistant, Audrey. Mayhew is clearly, loosely, but clearly based on William Faulkner, who did go to Hollywood and cranked out a bunch of low-rent screenplays. And Faulkner is widely regarded as one of the great literary voices in American history.
All I really need to learn is I learned in kindergarten, or no, that's Fulgrim.
But at any rate, this shows like how have the mighty fallen, if you will. Mayhew is played as this southern gent who has fallen on drink, probably even harder than Tom Cruise in the other film we discussed tonight. And he basically doesn't really have an out. He basically is owned by the studio, and so he just does the best he can do, or more to the point, Audrey does the best, as you find out eventually. So it's definitely a dark look at the studio system in terms of people's ability to function independently, really. And it is notable, IMDb says that Faulkner's first Hollywood contract was to write Flesh, a wrestling movie for Wallace Beery. So this is also a nod to the actual history of Faulkner's screenplay.
There's a bit of Ernest Hemingway in him too, isn't there?
Probably a little bit, yeah.
But as far as like hard living, drinking, dying young, all that kind of stuff. And specifically, I think it's a good film for people to watch insofar as, like we said, the trying to be an artist in the studio system, but specifically within old Hollywood, because, we talk a lot these days about how hard it is for anything original to get done in Hollywood because of how corporatized everything is and how much money is on the line and how no one wants to take risk, all that stuff. Now, with the classical studio system, they were able to do a lot of new things, but at the same time, they had to deal with, because the closest that we have to the old classical Golden Age Hollywood studio mogul model, the closest we had to that was Miramax / the Weinstein Company with Bob and Harvey Weinstein, and of course, we all know how well that turned out. If we had had Me Too back then they would have had to rightfully go after someone like Louis B. Mayer, who is up to very, very similar things. And so, in other words, and even if not in the realm of abuse and everything, certainly in the realm of capriciousness, so it's like you've got people that are overly afraid of risk versus people that are reckless, in all kinds of ways. And so it's kind of pick your poison. But I think that there's another genre that this film falls into, the name of which I can never correctly pronounce, and it is Kunstroman, which is a German term for, it's essentially, it says artist novel in English, which is a narrative of an artist's growth to maturity. And it is, that's definitely the case here, where it's all about an artist trying to find his way, trying to find his voice in two very different places in a time in American history that's not really friendly to him, and trying to even figure out what that Barton Fink failing really even is, because he doesn't know. And if he doesn't know, then how in the hell is Jack Lipnick going to know? How in the hell is an audience going to know? And that's part of why the theme of it being a wrestling picture that he's supposed to write, that's part of why that is such a key genre, because, and this is like intended to be more of like, I don't know if it's like truly Olympic style, or if it's like the initial rumblings of what would eventually become known as pro wrestling. Seems like it's more showmanship, but point being that thematically it is, as Jack Lipnick points out, it's about big men, big sweaty men wrestling and duking it out. Like, he breaks it down into very simple terms, very like mass audience terms. But the fact of the matter is that wrestling, whether professional or Olympic or whatever, it is very primal. It is very seemingly simplistic, but it also, on a metaphorical level, it is, Barton Fink's constantly wrestling with his own self-doubts, his own writer's block, his own lack of self-assurance about what the hell even is that Barton Fink feeling, and that's part. And I think every artist knows that, that your worst enemy, your best friend and your worst enemy, creatively speaking, is yourself always. And definitely references that very nicely. And so that is a pretty key thematic reinforcement, I think.
Oh yeah.
And we so one key thing with plotting, which again, the plot is very hard to sum up quickly, but something that is key to it throughout the whole thing is the unique friendship between Barton Fink and Charlie Meadows, his next door neighbor in the Hotel Earl. Which is kind of funny. So the time period wise, this is before the song, but filmmaking wise, the film was made after the song Hotel California, which it's like you can never leave, essentially, because that's the idea, is that he's staying there kind of perpetually, and we assume that Charlie Meadows is also, because there's no indication that he's not. So, which again, that's kind of a oxymoronic term, that you're in a hotel perpetually. But
the way that this hotel is set up, it kind of reminds me of the hotel that we see in American Horror Story.
Oh God.
Just a little bit.
That or obviously the Overlook Hotel was the
Right.
big inspiration, and plus
Yeah.
Roman Polanski's Repulsion and The Tenant were inspirations as well. But the friendship that they have of
Mhm.
sorts, it is very telling. It's set up in a unique way, and you've got all kinds of interesting dimensions to Charlie Meadows, aka Carl Munt.
Right.
I love the hotel because to me the
Right.
hotel is probably my second favorite character.
Oh yeah.
It's a living being, much like the Overlook,
Hmm.
but there are a lot of differences that set it apart from those type of hotels. Because yes, you have the claustrophobic feeling, but this one is more than just an old building. There is you can literally feel the walls
Well,
closing in
Hmm.
well,
throughout this.
and at least this one got the ending that Stephen King wanted in The Shining. So
God.
And also let's not forget vastly different locales, because the
Yeah.
Overlook Hotel is in the middle of the mountains and it's bloody cold, whereas the Hotel Earl is right smack dab in the middle of highly
Bronx.
populated Los Angeles, and it's fucking hot. So
Well,
it's
I thought it was.
totally different.
I thought it was New York.
No.
Hmm.
The Hotel Earl is out in L.A. That's where he stays
Yeah.
when he goes out to L.A.
Yeah.
We're only in New York for
Yeah.
a tiny part of the beginning.
And I
Okay.
do
Oh,
want
yeah.
actually, we should probably touch on that part real quick because we got a little tiny taste of the play. I think Bear Ruin Choirs is the name of the play.
Yeah.
And you get this scene of him at an after party, and the way that couple was just simpering over him, I was like, "Oh my god, could you get any more pretentious?"
Seriously. It definitely
Oh,
gave
it
you
is.
it definitely gave you from what little bit we got of the play.
Mhm.
It reminded me a little bit of if you mixed like Chekhov with like Arthur Miller or something.
I definitely got an Arthur Miller vibe. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of that.
Well, and not to
Apparently-
mention that Charlie Meadows, his stated profession is salesman, traveling
Right.
salesman. So obviously, Death of a Salesman
Right.
ties into that. Go ahead. Doug.
Apparently, Barton Fink was partly based on a playwright, Clifford Odets. So I'm not as familiar with his work, but he was there was an actual touchstone there for the work or what have you. Um, and on your point on the well, you just made me think of something I never thought of before, and I kind of wonder because the Coens, I have never seen them. I even read, I think I showed you guys, I think when I did Raising Arizona or Oh Brother, I don't know. There was a really cool book we had in my library. It was called, I think it was called The Coen Brothers. This book ties the films together. It's a really good book. And it shows all kinds of stuff that they were thinking with all the films. But even in that book, there's no reference to Barton Fink and Sullivan's Travels. They talk about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with Sullivan's Travels. But it's like, this was a connection that I drew years ago. And I'm like, why? I've never read this. But that's the thing. It's like they're famously coy with their influences. And they will come right out and say one thing and then just totally ignore the rest of it.
Uh-huh.
And I just had a completely random thought when you were talking about Hotel California, because this is the perfect stand-in. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Uh-huh.
And then fast forward to The Big Lebowski, where the dude hates
the fucking Eagles, man.
Exactly. And I'm kind of wondering if the Coens had that in mind of like a sort of a weird little follow through of that. Might be the backstory of why he hates the Eagles or something like.
It was undoubtedly floating around in their consciousness somewhere,
right.
Without a doubt.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like with like Kubrick never almost never did he come out and explicitly say what the film was about, but like within the Kubrick archives, like especially like Eyes Wide Shut, for example, the cult that's portrayed in there is not a representation of any one specific one, but he was most definitely thinking about secret societies and sex magic and stuff, because the Kubrick archives all make specific mentions of, notes and names of books that are about those subjects and such. So, it's definitely floating around in the artist's mind somewhere, which, for a lot of the great art out there, it's usually it's almost like trying to catch butterflies. It's like they're floating around. Maybe you catch one or two and you put them into your butterfly book or whatever, with the pins or whatever, but then there are other ones that are still floating around inside your brain. That's I think a fairly good way of summarizing it.
And I had also mentioned this while I was watching it. I was like, it would have been cool to pair this with Lebowski.
Yeah.
Partly because of those weird little overlaps, like John Polito's in both films, Steve Buscemi's in both films, but more notably, John Goodman in this movie, he's like a study of quiet rage. He comes across as all cheerful and upbeat, and he only lets it overflow every now and then at the very end, he loses it. Whereas in Lebowski, he's turned the filter off. He is all rage. And
you
then
mark
you
that
have
frame and 8, you're going to be entering a world of pain.
And yet, for all of his anger, he's still the loyal friend to the dude. And then, and again, Hotel California does show up in the movie. The Gypsy Kings do that great Spanish cover.
Yeah.
And they use it to introduce John Turturro as Jesus Quintana.
Fucking Quintana, that creep can roll, man. Yeah, but he's a pervert, dude.
So I gotta say, when it comes to the character of Munt, he is. I still say he is one of Goodman's best roles.
Oh yeah,
because
without a doubt.
I feel like his role in Big Lebowski was an easier role by far to play than Munt, because it's a lot harder to play quiet rage well, because if you're playing overt rage, it's pretty easy to show because you're wearing your emotions right on your face. But with quiet rage,
and yet Walter Sobchak, there is an interesting point of comparison to be made there, just because Walter, you get the sense that he's someone that, that rages inside of him all the time, but you can really see that he's consciously trying to keep it under control and trying to be composed and trying to be based on the real person, John Milius, that they based him on, the director and screenwriter. You get the sense that he's trying to be that kind of Zen warrior that John Milius tried to be. But it's more so that his rage kind of seeps through a lot more easily despite his efforts. Whereas with Charlie Meadows, like, you get a similar sense of that, except that it's more like a facade, trying to maintain a facade rather than trying to keep the natural anger in check based on the person that you are, and that he makes no presupposition to be something other than he is, and he just tries to, because I think Walter does see himself as like a Zen warrior, whereas Charlie Meadows is trying to be this ultimate, because this was at the same time as Roseanne, as I recall, because he's playing, blue collar working man for real. And, so that's part of why that's brilliant casting, but also, he's trying to project that image at all times. This, like, a lot of serial killers, like the effective ones like Ted Bundy, work really hard on their extremely sincere, very, very friendly facades that are so carefully crafted. And
that's the thing, as you said right there. I mean, that's the point. That the layers are there, and if you look for them in Goodman's performance, you can actually see the layers. and
Mm-hmm.
that takes talent. I think people have overlooked Goodman a lot,
Yeah.
and I think Roseanne is one of the reasons. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the Coens have managed to bring more out of Goodman than most, and they
Mm-hmm.
show it, especially in this film. Especially
Yeah.
when he's being ignored, basically. He says, I could tell you about,
Yeah.
and then he just goes on like,
Yeah.
And this is why, I've said so many times that I don't know why Michael Lerner got the Oscar nod. It's not that he did a bad job. He did a great job and he was very entertaining in the role. But it's like Goodman was in that weird gray zone where he could have been a lead or a support, and they put him in support. And because of that, his Oscar nod would have been a supporting nod.
yeah.
I really do think that he deserved that infinitely more than Lerner did. And he did get nominated here and there for the role. And honestly, again, of the bit players, I would give John Mahoney more credence for his performance. And then, of course, Turturro should have been up for lead actor. I mean, this is probably his best performance.
Without a doubt.
And so he's had some really good ones over the years too. Again, I'm not discounting Lerner, but it's one of those rare examples of where you could make a pretty easy substitution and not really say that, anyway, there were other things that could and should have been up for too. But have we hit most of the characters at this point? Are there any? Well, we haven't really talked about Audrey, have we?
Yeah, we haven't. I mean, now she's kind of the power behind the literary throne in many ways, and she's sort of, well, she's a very soft-spoken Southern belle, and I know that this might seem funny, but she does such a great job with her characterization. Well, in many ways, one of the genres that this film touches on, well, two actually, neo noir and mystery, and she definitely fits the femme fatale type, even though she doesn't really have any nefarious intentions, like your classical femme fatale does. But she definitely fits that role.
She definitely feels like someone out of a noir, yeah.
I wonder if he was
Definitely.
in fact the person moaning in the next room on the first night that John Turturro's character Barton Fink was there when he noticed the noises that Mr. Charlie was making in the other room.
Well,
I don't know why she would be there at that point, but I'm not ruling it out either.
And they talking about people who work frequently with directors. I know Judy Davis primarily as someone who did a lot of Woody Allen films in the 90s. So it's kind of interesting seeing her do a Coen film here. She's a talented actress as well who kind of fell off the scene at some point, I guess. Although apparently she's in that new Ratched series, which looks kind of fun. I don't know. I haven't seen that, but but yeah, I thought she was kind of a fun. She made a good contrast to Mayhew. They made a good team, and I'm trying hard to find I know I saw a reference on IMDb last night, and I can't find it now. I don't know why, but there was a weird credit at the end of the film where they said something like the golden throat of something or other. Okay, I think it was William Preston Robertson. It said something like the golden throat of William Preston Robertson. And apparently he did all of Mayhew's really crazy drunk rants and whatnot, which I was kind of disappointed to find out that wasn't John Mahoney, but that's I found it interesting that they call him the Golden Throat.
One thing that so something that's interesting, you mentioned everything comes back to Daniel, especially with the Coen brothers, which is or sorry, not Job.
Yeah.
Which is true, but thinking back as I'm looking at I was trying to figure out what awards, Oscar awards that this was nominated for. One of the things that because there's a ton of thematic symbolism throughout this thing, one of which is religion, and specifically, I'm just looking up the Wikipedia here. It mentions the part of the Bible that he randomly flips to is chapter 2 in the book of Daniel, which of course is a pretty seminal book in the Old Testament. And from chapter 2, and the king Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to the Chaldeans, I recall not my dream. If ye will not make known unto me my dream and its interpretation, ye shall be cut in pieces, and of your tent shall be made a dunghill. And that is preceding our dear Audrey being savagely killed and presumably beheaded by Karl Munt.
Or as the detective so colorfully described it, ventilated with a shotgun.
And so interesting connection there. You do get a sense of the blurring of real life with dreams and with dream logic, surreality throughout the thing. And it's also not a coincidence that this film, besides The Shining being an inspiration, also in the sound design, Racerhead, which also blurs the line between dream logic and reality.
Well, you mentioned that Bible scene, and you didn't mention the fact that he starts reading lines from his play in the Bible.
Well, that's part of what happens there. That's the section that he flips to, and then he starts reading his own lines of dialogue, and then you can clearly see the lines of reality blurring, and then he tries to talk to that incredibly zombie-like elevator tenant about the Bible, and he's just comatose pretty much. And again, that's kind of hellish in its own weird way, almost like a corpse or like a someone who's brain dead or whatever. But yeah, it's something that is definitely it's something to throw out there. And then also I'm looking at this kind of overlaps with the this is how I serve the common man, that whole thing. That final scene, Charlie says, most guys I just feel sorry for. Yeah, it tears me up inside to think about what they're going through, how trapped they are. I understand it. I feel for them, so I try to help them out. And if we go with the Karl Munt / Charlie Meadows as the devil kind of metaphor, you almost get the idea that he's sort of shuffling them off this mortal coil, or kind of succumbing to that misery of existence or whatever, because he lives in his own hell. And it goes into the idea of the devil living in hell and it not being a pleasant experience for him, instead of it being like, oh, this is great.
I'm almost wondering if for me, I'm almost wondering if it's not so much that it's hell and he's the devil, as is it more that it's like a purgatory and he's sort of testing Fink to see, what he should do. And, the and I do like one line that really stuck out to me, was partly because it was spoken with some emphasis, but there was the line where he says something like, well, why me? Or something like that. And then Goodman or Meadows is like, because you don't listen.
Yeah.
And it's true. Fink cannot listen.
Exactly.
He cannot listen. He is so, he's one of those people that thinks he has all the answers or he thinks that he doesn't have them, but he will find them, but he doesn't even understand the concept of if you open yourself up to, that's like I said, where he's almost the opposite of Sullivan. Sullivan kind of opened himself up to everything coming in, and this is almost the opposite. Like, it's not so much that he's actively shutting it out, it's just he's accidentally because he is active, but it's not conscious. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And this is one of the differentiations for me between this and something like A Single Man.
A Serious Man.
A Serious Man. Sorry,
yeah, that's a slightly different.
Yeah,
I confuse the two titles.
I do too.
But
to be fair,
in A Serious Man, though there are some things there, the man, he does very little to warrant all of the hell that befalls him, which is very similar to how Job plays out. Really, Job is a loyal follower, and he gets tortured for it. Now, this is played out as a comedy by some people, which I still disagree. I disagree with that being a comedy. But in this case, Barton Fink, I actually think that the main writer does deserve some of the hell that he creates, or the purgatory, because he tries to be this individual, and he claims to understand the everyman. He claims to be that individual that knows the audience, but at the same time, he shuts everything else out. He is that pretentious artist, and
it's his hubris.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There is, and that's one of the major differences when you're talking about Job and something there. I really think, like I said, A Serious Man is a much better depiction of Job than Barton Fink, because there is at least some measure of that coming back to bite him. Whereas in the other one, it's not nearly as clear.
Now, you know what's an ironic what's an ironic counterpoint with what Jacob said with because you don't listen, that whole thing, which is true, and yet the character who does listen, who does have all those stories that Barton doesn't want to hear, he's the one with the persistent ear infection that oozes pus and stuffs his ear full of cotton or whatever. And I mean, that's pretty gross when it starts oozing pus towards the end. But I do find that to be kind of an ironic counterpoint. So, in other words, perhaps the oozing of pus, as disgusting as it is, perhaps, the fact that that's there, and yet he is the one who is in touch with, flawed, horrible, bleeding, pus guzzling or gushing humanity, is the one, who is, ventilating people with shotguns and everything. So it's sort of this, it's almost like the price of having opened oneself up, that you start oozing in a way, metaphorically speaking.
Oh geez, I had a thought and I've lost it. Anyway.
Well, you're just thinking about that pus, it just makes you hungry, doesn't it?
That's no, not entirely. What's that, Dave?
I said makes you rumbly in your tummy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, rumbly and the tumbly. No, that's
well, if that doesn't do it for you, then a severed head in a hat box will.
Oh
geez.
And like I said, that definitely
that is a severed head, or what do you think?
I'm wondering if that influenced Seven. I really am.
I don't know.
What's in the box?
I mean, it's very heavily implied that it is a severed head, although it's never clear. So for all we know, that it could be whatever was in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
For all we know, Charlie Meadows could have literally cleaned all the junk out of his drawer, put it in a box, given it to Fink, and then decided he didn't want it back.
Could have had a lot of junk in his trunk, you know.
But yeah, it is heavily implied that it's probably Audrey's head, and it's like,
But I like the fact that we don't see it because our mind kind of fills in the blanks.
right.
Well, and that does, it's funny because so we've got some contrast with, so we got Audrey, this fulfilling the femme fatale role, even though again she doesn't really have any ulterior motive or whatever, not really. So you got that on the one hand, and then you've got the woman in the painting who reminds me a lot of the lady in the radiator in Eraserhead in some ways. But what you have there is you've got this painting that's in this hellishly hot claustrophobic room with peeling wallpaper that looks like flesh. It's just this awful place. And then you've got this painting of this beautiful idyllic beach, which, given that it's LA, is not far from where he is. And yet it feels so far away. This idealized setting with this, as we can, reasonably surmise, this beautiful woman that's staring out there at the ocean, at these infinite possibilities, etc. And then we get the final shot of the film where, by the time that he gets there to this idyllic setting, sees this woman in the painting, he is more lost than ever, and that sea, that ocean that's stretching out before him, seems almost like a void instead of like this beautiful idyllic setting. Plus, the bird flying in the painting and in the shot, it is is that a seagull or a pelican that goes down, grab the fish. I can't remember.
I think it was probably a pelican or something. I don't remember, but I had read that was an accident, like that they just happened to catch that bird supposedly, and that's like, if so, that was perfect timing.
It really was. Well, I think it's just a great kind of reflection of, that we have these dreams to kind of carry us through our harsh existence, and then we seemingly get to where we wanted to go, and we can sometimes be more lost than ever, or it's not what we thought it would be, or it's part of it is perception also, because for the woman, it's a perfectly nice day, and she's having a great time, and what's up with this weirdo in the suit with this box that he doesn't know what's in it, so it's just, I think that's an interesting bit of food for thought there.
And yet she went ahead and made herself comfortable right there. She could have gone on further down the beach. So
yeah,
that's that. There you go. There's potential possibilities.
Indeed. Maybe she's into severed heads. You don't know.
You never know. You never know.
Whatever does it for you, does it for you.
Right.
Maybe there's a little
man says everyone needs a hobby.
Maybe there's
exactly.
Maybe there's a bit of Bluebeard beard in this whole process too.
or Reanimator.
And so we do need to back up slightly as well. I kind of introduced this with the one line, but of course you've got the big part where the cops. We kind of briefly mentioned the cops. They were
cops.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Very
anti-Semitic.
interesting. Yeah. They handcuff Fink to a bed in his room. They're probably about to read him the riot act pretty much. And then they hear a noise out in the hall and they look out and Munt comes down the hall. Well, first you see all this smoke rolling in. And then Munt walks out and the fire comes with him. And then he puts his case down and then pulls out a big old shotgun and starts running towards them. I'll show you the life of the mind. I will show you the life of the mind. Just firing a gun.
And specifically, look upon me.
Yes.
I'm just like, man, talk about like a biblical, way of of killing somebody. It's like, holy shit. That whole thing, like that just makes, if that doesn't make you shit yourself, then nothing will.
He ventilated them good.
He really did, but it's like, I mean, seriously, like that was, nobody can bellow quite like John Goodman when he's pissed. And, he did that, and he's got like this really biblical kind of thing that he's saying as he's gunning these people down while the hotel is being engulfed in flames. Like, or at least that's how I was. But I mean, I'm like, damn, talk about a climax. Like, if you count this as a horror movie, which I would certainly be tempted to do so, that has to be one of the best climaxes.
And if this had been a horror movie and it had kind of clicked with people as a horror movie, it's a premise that's rife for sequels. They could have done like, every couple of years, Meadows makes a new friend, and
which actually they have been apparently kicking around some ideas for a sequel called Goldfink, which would take place in the 60s or would take place in the 70s, with Fink being a hippie with a large Jew fro, apparently.
Well, like I think they say he was the professor or something. Like, I guess he'd given up on writing since Capitol owned his work.
Well, I mean, look at the
interesting.
Well, who he had, I mean, a lot of it sets up him really becoming the individual that he kind of despised earlier, the writer who had fallen into the drink. But that's because, again, a lot of his ability, I mean, a lot of this happened. I mean, when he goes to the studio at the end and they're like, no, screw this artsy stuff. We've got lots of that.
I think that's what a lot of, and I think that's what a lot of directors tend to run into to even nowadays, where the studios want this specific, the specific style, and when the director does his own thing, they're like, well, fuck you. This is not what we want.
We wanted that Barton Fink feeling. What the hell is this?
That's more of a. I mean, I think directors go through that, but that is far worse on the writer level because writers are, well, especially these days, but even as early as the 40s, but especially these days, writers are largely viewed as disposable, even though a good screenplay is still the foundation of the movie. And so, that's part of the paradoxical kind of hypocritical nature of the beast there is that, now if a good, producer, good studio, if they have faith in the person or if they know what they're doing, then they will, let them do their thing. And, all fairness to the Weinsteins, they did have a good nose for that sort of thing. So if it works, then it's great. But like if it becomes to by committee or, if someone's just unhinged, like, Jack Lipnick or whatever, then the disposability comes into play real quick. Not to mention WGA rules and all that stuff. Go ahead.
I would say, based on my research and whatever, that the writer at this time, when we did Sullivan's Travels, I did a lot of research into Preston Sturges, and he's considered basically the first writer who really got to make his own movies. I think that's one of the reasons the Coens idolize him as much as they do. But he had to deal with a lot of guff as a writer before doing, but you're right. At that time, most writers, they were a dime a dozen. The studio didn't care about the writer. That was, they owned them. And now I don't know that I would say they're more disposable now, but I would say in the case maybe of like major tentpole projects and that sort of thing, You're right. By committee seems to be the way that a lot of these things get done. You'll see 5 or 10 writing credits on a single screenplay, and that's not counting uncredited rewrites. But then when you get something like the Coen Brothers or Richard Linklater or people, David Lynch, people like them, they still have a great deal of autonomy over their own scripts and what have you.
Speaking of David Lynch, Judy Davis was in Naked Lunch as characters. So,
well, basically, the fewer cooks you have in the kitchen, the easier time you have, because look no further than Kevin Smith's experience just as a day player on Live Free or Die Hard, for an example of this overly bloated studio movie that he does some uncredited rewrites, and those have to get approved by the studio, and it takes forever, and it's just this constantly slow process, needlessly so. So it's definitely, it remains a problem. And one thing that they do these days that is different is that oftentimes the writer will be kept around in case the director wants something punched up, or if a continuity problem or a storytelling problem or whatever, if it presents itself, which that wasn't the case back then, and it has evolved quite a lot, which again, I wish that everyone could have attended the History of American Screenwriting class with me, in which I saw this film, because
would have been cool.
It was an excellent class. I mean, I was really lucky to have been in the writing for the screen and stage minor as I was, because of how disciplined it was and how directed it was over a 2-year period. I think everyone here would have gotten a lot out of it, even if you hadn't wanted to go too far with screenwriting, beyond that. I think you would have just found an interesting class.
Oh yeah, unfortunately they had nothing like that at my school. I did take religious interpretation of film, which was a really cool class, and we actually did watch Fargo as part of that class. That was part of the American Nightmare narrative. He had 4 narratives. It was the American Nightmare, the Jesus narrative, the Greek narrative. I can't remember the other one. No, I say American Nightmare, American Dream, American Nightmare. It was but we hit some good ones, but that was one of the...
Not the Job narrative?
It
all ties back to it. I mean, that should be there.
Yeah, I can't remember what the other one was. It's driving me nuts. But the only ones I had already seen were Fargo, The Usual Suspects, and American Beauty. But we also did Babette's Feast. We did Breaker Morant. We did Crimes and Misdemeanors. There were a lot of good ones, but that was a fun class.
Well, I was very thankful that with my minor that it was the only program of its kind for undergraduates in the country. So, and I was one of 2 students in the history of it at that time to have gotten into Phi Beta Kappa. So, and the other person was in my same class. So we were both kind of trendsetters in that way.
Good times. So what
else to talk about with this? I mean, the thing is, like, any conversation about this movie, just given the nature of what it is, will inevitably go all over the place, because the film is very much all over the place. But that's part
I'm sure you'll enjoy. I don't think I'd even thought about this until I saw a little tidbit on IMDb, and I'm like, okay, I wonder if this was the Coens being kind of making a very screwy homage, but I like it. But the whole thing about the shoe shining, because it's like there's so many such a feeling of the Overlook, and you get all these shoes set out for shining, and it's that's kind of fun.
Well, that or like I said before, you get the sense that there are, or at least there were, other people presumably that stayed
Right.
there, but we don't get to see them. We get to hear them a little bit in a very ghostly fashion, but we don't get to see them. And
Mhm.
so that alone does make a overlook kind of thematic
Mhm.
tie, if nothing else.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So good times.
Oh yeah, for kids.
Oh, I did want to mention one thing. You
Mm.
mentioned the Oscar history, and then we kind of scooted away from it. This
Mhm.
was up for three: supporting actor, art direction, set decoration, costume design. Sound
Mhm.
familiar?
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's almost the exact same awards that Last Samurai was up for. It's just missing the sound mixing, which is weird because the sound was a big part of this film. It's like,
It
yeah.
was. Well,
And actually, we should
that's the
mention
Eraserhead tie.
the music was very spare. They didn't have much, but it was another great Carter Burwell collaboration. He has done some phenomenal stuff with the Coens. And
Mhm.
this one, of course, came between the incredibly lush and gorgeous score for Miller's Crossing and the much more notable scores for Hudsucker and for Fargo. So this one, I I didn't like it a lot at first. I actually have the soundtrack. I think it's this one in Raising Arizona. And then there was another one that I think was Blood Simple and Fargo. I actually have those soundtracks. But when I get to this part on it, I'm like, where's the music? But when it's playing in the movie, it works beautifully with what they're going for, I think. Like it's yeah.
And there's some good, like, big band swing, stuff every now and again that's
A little
in the
bit.
scene. It's diegetic music, but you're right. It's much more of a soundscape type movie than it is a music type movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Favorite scenes?
Incidentally, we will one day cover Miller's Crossing, which has one of the greatest scores ever written. And Fargo is probably a close second or third. Uh, do we
No,
want
Opinion.
well, no.
to? What happened?
I was gonna. I was just gonna say, go look at any Woody Allen film if you're looking for
Oh,
just sound for music when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to film.
most any of his are pretty impressive. Yes. And
On
this
similar kind of, jazz swing, big band sort of feel.
in general, that's a lot of what he does. Is a lot of the the jazz in particular. Of course, the decade ended with Sweet and Low Down, which was a love letter to jazz, and it was just a phenomenal one. And then, again, this came right after I think Judy Davis's first collaboration with him was Alice, and then there was Husbands and Wives the next year, and then later in the decade, Deconstructing Harry and Celebrity. I think those were all the ones she did with him, but they were Celebrity, if I remember correctly, had a particularly good score. I feel like that was a really good, not really a score. They're usually found music and re recordings of standards and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I guess we probably is it about time to talk about favorites and stuff? I think it
Yeah.
probably.
Oh yes.
Okay, Brandon, you want to kick off?
Well, I love that. Well, it's not final scene because there's stuff that comes after it, but where the hotel is on fire,
Mm-hmm.
John Goodman has taken out the two detectives, and he's just sitting there with our main character
Mm-hmm.
and letting him know, like, this, and having his little monologue. It's his moment to shine, really, where finally, after ignoring him this whole time, he's finally listening, at least
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
that one time. No, admittedly, his life is in danger and he's afraid of being killed, but it's
Right.
still it's a moment, and I just love all of that. The flames and the smoke burning around them, the whole setting. It just the intensity of it. It's just an amazing scene. To me, it's probably my favorite part of the film. Other than the bellhop coming up from the floor. I don't know why, but I find that amusing.
And actually, those two things together, we should probably, we did mention that the Oscars gave a shout out to the set design. It was pretty impressive. But I don't think we mentioned the effects. And that fire scene in particular, there was some effects involved. And they did a good job with them, I think.
I'd have to say my favorite two scenes would be one would be the fire scene where he's coming towards him with the shotgun, definitely. But my other favorite scene is when Steve Buscemi states his hotel business. That's the whole scene. I didn't think that Steve Buscemi entirely had it in him to speak so fast. He's probably a casual, speaker and whatnot. So he surprised me in that role is taking up the bellboy, kind of existence. So I just liked the whole spiel there, the salesmanship.
Right. I think a couple of them are really fast talking. Like I said in the commentary, I'd forgotten how fast talking Michael Lerner was, and Tony Shalhoub as well. He definitely was going a mile a minute.
I mean, there's something I like to call Coen speak when it comes to films, because there are a few filmmakers that you can just listen to a conversation and tell who is directing them. And the Coens, that's one particular. Kevin Smith is one that you can tell just by the way that people talk in his films.
Tarantino.
Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson. These are ones that it's just a signature thing of the way that they just handle it. It's an amazing, amazing deal. Something about that is just really cool.
I think for me, it's hard to pick a favorite moment or scene. I did like that one part where Michael Lerner was talking about that Barton Fink feeling, and you must have it in spades. And I also like that part with the detective where he's just like, "You're a sick fuck, Fink." There were a couple of good little one-liners scattered about here and there. Most of the interactions between Fink and Meadows, I think, are probably among my favorites. I agree with Brandon that final speech by Meadows was or Munt or whatever was a really great little moment. But some of the earlier ones where Fink is pontificating on his views and you see Meadows like trying to get a word in and just trying to be there and be a good friend and be friendly and at the same time like biting his tongue at the indignation of not being able to be taken seriously. Again, just the two of them, their acting levels of both of them in the movie, it is just great. And there were other little bits too. I mean, again, I'm a big fan of John Mahoney, so the scenes he was in, I enjoyed. There weren't many, but it was, and Shalhoub as well. I was also a big Monk fan, so I like Tony Shalhoub, and he's another one we've examined in this channel. 13 Ghosts. It's a different role for him.
We if they'd have played their cards right, we could have had Monk versus Munt. Which I concur with everything everyone said as far as favorite scenes. Plus, I want to throw in there, obviously the best scene, of course, is the climax. But I also want to throw in there just how comedically awkward the wrestling scene is, where he tries to show him a move there, and all the awkward homoerotic tension and the buddy comedy aspect of it, I think, is amusing. And again, there is something about like the way that the camera moves in when he's like, "Come on, come on," he's like enticing him to come in there, and he's like overly friendly but also creepy in that he's over. It's like that's just great, and plus it is just kind of funny because again he pins him like in 2 seconds.
Right. Oh yeah, I should have. You were out of your weight class.
Yeah, yeah. He doesn't even have to try. Which I mean, and that is the thing with John Goodman. Like he is a very physical presence, a very physical actor, and he's big in every sense. Like he can bellow. He's kind of big in the waist, but also big, broad-shouldered. So you really buy all of the physically strong stuff that he does in the Coen Brothers work. Especially here where he pulls the bedpost apart, all that stuff. Like you really buy it, and there are some people that beyond just like overweight or whatever, that you really buy that they have like this raw strength of physicality, but also strength of like personality and all that, and he has all of that in spades.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
but not that Barton Fink feeling, unfortunately.
Now, wasn't it when that cop said you're a sick fuck, Fink? Wasn't that when Fink was trying to describe that wrestling?
Yeah, that was hilarious because they thought that they were homosexuals. It's like we weren't. We wrestled.
Yes.
I love it.
I meant to make a point at some point. I don't think I've said it, so I'm going to say it real quick before I forget. And that's just on the whole thing of Fink not listening. At the end, it's kind of the typical movie narrative of someone who's like blocked, who can't write or can't, whatever, that they succeed and then they actually succeed, And it's kind of cool how this one kind of takes that and inverts it, because he finally, the box opens and all the ideas come flowing out, and he writes and writes and writes, and he creates something that he thinks is a masterpiece, and he gives it to Lipnick, and Lipnick's like, what is this?
Yeah. Well, and the funny part about that is if you listen to Fink talking to himself as he's writing, it's pretty much exactly the same as the play he already wrote.
Right. And that's what I was saying. Like where I was going with this is it's a good example once again where he really never learns his lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Like if he knew how to listen to other people and respect their viewpoints in any way, then he would have been very wary of turning in something that was too similar to what he'd already written.
Uh-huh.
And he would have been like, okay, well, this doesn't really feel like what he's described to me. So, yeah, in a sense, he may have written the best thing he was ever going to write, but it is more likely that he did just rehash the play, and in his exhaustion, he thought it was brilliant, but it really wasn't because it didn't connect to an audience. And that's
exactly.
Yeah.
And this is why I feel like the ending of this film fits well, and in my opinion, is much better in my mind than something like my exact least favorite, which even more than A Serious Man, which was their Parton Perry Je t'aime. But they just basically, which is a comedy scene where they basically a bunch of people beat the crap out of gosh, what's his name?
Steve Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi for no reason. And
I don't know why it cracked me up, because it is so cruel and rotten. But
that's the essence of the feeling of that, of what they go for. That the idea that Job is a comedy, that you should laugh at it.
I mean,
I
you
understand.
you can laugh at it in the cosmic sense, I suppose, in terms of like the ridiculousness of human existence and endeavors and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I mean,
That's
you
the
know,
thing
you,
is,
you yourself have cited Picking Up the Pieces as one of your all-time
oh
favorite
yes,
endings, and that's the
and
same
that
basic concept.
yes, but at the same time, there is something about that. There is some evil that can be righted, and yes, the
Right.
darkness is there, but at the same time, I feel like with some of those other things, like with A Serious Man, like with that short, it's basically watching somebody kick a puppy to death and then laughing at it. You know, that to me is like, which is very different. So,
Right.
but this case, I looked at it, and because he wasn't listening, because he had every moment, he had plenty of opportunities to redeem himself
Mm-hmm.
all throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
And even at the end, I still found myself rooting for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
I still did not feel fully sorry for him when the ending came tumbling down upon him
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because he did not learn. But you'd hope that he had. You'd hope that what he was writing was not the same thing, that he had learned his lesson through
Right.
the trials and tribulations that he had done. But because he hadn't learned, he paid the price, and that's what makes that an excellent ending.
Well, that and there is something to be said for, we're so used in fiction, in cinema specifically, we're so used to characters that undergo an arc and who make some kind of great change and that kind of stuff. The Christmas Carol kind of transformation. We're so
Mhm.
used to that. Every now and again, you'll get a character that is like Forrest Gump or Marty McFly, where they themselves don't change all that much, but they are an agent of change for those around them. And then more commonly than that, but less commonly than the arc model, you will get characters that are given every opportunity to change, and they are on that trajectory and they choose not to, or they try and fail. And those can be really interesting. Like, I think Young Adult's a good example of that.
Oh,
Also,
yeah.
this is, and that then Young Adult's more like a deliberate choice for this character
Right.
not to change. And then something like Up in the Air, also, Jason
Oh
Reitman film.
yes,
That one is more
very good
so
film.
where the character, well, but that's a different one where the character
Mhm.
is faced with the yawning realization of the emptiness of his life, but the
Mhm.
opportunity to change has passed him by because of his lack of awareness. But his
Right.
awareness at the end is different than where he was, but it's more like what could have been and wasn't because of his lack of awareness. Here, it's more so like trying and failing.
Right.
So it's there, but that I think can be as interesting, if not more interesting, than the person who arcs and changes and all that kind of stuff. Because usually, for those of us in real life, if we do make big sweeping changes like that, it's usually on a smaller level, but we remain essentially the same people amidst all of it, but maybe hopefully a little bit better for the wear.
Well, and one of the reasons I think this one holds up so well for me is that Fink is one of those characters that frustrates the hell out of me, but I don't dislike him. I kind of want him to succeed. I kind of want him to learn. Young Adult frustrated me. I need to watch it again, but my first watch left me frustrated and annoyed, whereas all my other Reitman films I typically loved on first viewing. But the good example of one of this kind of narrative that I hated the character and his choices so much that when he got what was coming to him, I cheered. And if they had left it at that, I would love the ending. But then they had to go one step further, and I hated what they did after that. And that was, we mentioned earlier, Adam Sandler. in his film Uncut Gems,
Oh
he
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
he had every opportunity to redeem himself, and he pissed it all away.
Oh, I
And he was
know.
such a frustrating character. We'll have to cover that one eventually. But
That's a fucking great film. I love
that
it.
was one though that I like this one so much better, partly because Fink never ticked me off that badly.
Part of it is that you do get a glimmer of he is a talented guy. He is severely out of Donnie, you're out of your element. He is severely out of his element in many ways. But he does have talent. He just needs to harness it properly, as opposed to, say, Charlize Theron in Young Adult, where she is this aggressively superficial, immature person that has no real hope or desire to get out of it, even though subconsciously she's miserable. But yeah, I mean, I love the film. I'm really glad we got to cover it. I don't know when else we would have covered it because of how weird it is, but that's half the fun.
Yeah. All right.
Shall we give our outros?
I know I finally saw this film. So.
Yeah, good deal. So how many you got left to watch, Dave?
Of the Coen Brothers? I haven't seen Hudsucker Proxy because it's very hard to find. I don't even have it in my collection. I know I've got A Serious Man somewhere in my collection. I just haven't watched it. As far as I think I have to see.
If we do the Second Chances month again, Brandon, someone may have to put up a space.
I have not seen Fargo.
You've not seen Fargo?
I have not.
Oh, I'll have to consider that one.
And let's see what else. It's hard to place what other ones. So of the Coen brothers, I've seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I have seen Raised in Arizona Because of You. I have seen The Big Lebowski.
All right.
So that's and I'll have to watch it again eventually. But I know that.
And we'll say again, let's hope all the best for Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I sincerely hope that the dude does not have to abide in heaven prematurely, but the dude will abide nonetheless.
Right.
Because this aggression will not stand, man.
Yeah. Well, I guess Brandon's temporarily or fully gone. I don't know. Oh, there we go.
It just got knocked off because when I took my phone off the charger, it went to rest mode and kicked me off.
All right, outros then.
Yes, outros.
I am Dane Kyle, aka Dane Damerung on YouTube. This was my birthday selection. My birthday's tomorrow. I'm gonna be 29. Oh boy, get my walker out now. I do a show on. I do a show on YouTube called the channel is Indie Horror Film Creative, and the show that I do is Blu-ray Views, where I talk about Blu-rays that I unbox and talk about. And most recent video that I did was about my angst for the fact that Amazon delivered a damaged Back to the Future 4K set to me, and how much that pissed me off. And I generally don't rant at the camera, but that warranted a rant. But I do that. I'm also a filmmaker. I'm trying to get a short made for an anthology this winter. And, now that my life is kind of stabilized now, which is unbelievable, now that seems to have happened, I will be, and with my birthday having arrived, I will be making some list of goals for the rest of my life, so that way I can finally live life on my own terms.
Awesome.
You want to go, Brandon?
Sure. Of course, some Septum Sin, a Septum Sin versus the world. We love physical media here. We are in the midst of Horrorween, but we tried to extend the holiday thanks to a lovely Friday the 13th set that came out from Shout Factory. So we are covering the entirety of the Friday the 13th series. So we've covered the first two, so you can check that out on our channel. But 3 and 4 are going to be discussed next Monday. And if you want, you can join us live when we do that. We do answer questions as they appear, and we did do so. It was an amazing discussion. Can't wait for 3 and 4. It's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it more horror or is it more ween?
That's the question, isn't it? I guess it's going to become more horror after next week, because then Halloween's passed. So,
but then we're just a bunch of weenies.
But I've also been aside from the typical new releases and pickups, which we have a special Halloween edition pickup next week, where we're going to try and do Halloween type pickups, which will be fun.
At least a chunk of it.
Yeah, at least most of them anyway. And I'm also doing a Halloween playthrough. I'm actually doing a Let's Play, which is a weird thing that I'm adding to the channel. I'm going through the game Costume Quest. We have cleared the mall, and we're moving out ways. And I've heard that Death Toilet 3 releases this week. So if I can get that one seen, we might have a new Anne Hedenia project episode coming soon. So with that being said, I also work for Inside Movies Galore. Dave is a really rough boss. He beats me. He beats me every other day. But
you were the one who was cracking the whip the other day, and I was like, I'm getting my back ready for my thrashing. Because I've been bad.
You see, it works its way down.
Yeah, it trickles down.
But I do help run the schedule on Inside Movies Galore, trying to help carry some of the load, because we're kind of a Inside Movies Galore family here.
Yep.
And we took a brief break from our October horror, but we're going to come right back to it for a slap bang finale with 2 great films. One pre-show, which is the original Night of the Demons, 1988.
Oh boy.
A fun romp. And one I've been kind of knee-deep in the sequels and remakes. So I'll look forward to rewatching the original. And then, of course, we have a lovely main show, which got a good number of votes, which is a little movie that most of y'all probably haven't heard of, called From Dusk Till Dawn. Something by a kind of unknown director. And
it's a kids movie, right?
Yeah, it's
kids.
It's something like akin to Barney, something like that.
Exactly. Now, can you imagine if you had Barney in the same movie as Salma Hayek with her, bikini and the snake and the headdress and all that? I mean, that would be the greatest movie ever.
Now, if you are one of the Inside Movies Galore crew, you can actually get some extra voting on for our new martial arts mayhem, which is going to be our theme for November. We got the final list, so you guys can get in on that and hopefully get your favorite martial arts film to win. But if you're not, and you're a member of one of these other groups, and if you're not a member of them, you should be a member. You can vote as well, which is Movie Collections, Animazing Collections Incorporated, Moe's Tavern, and Talk Movies with Us. Great groups, fun groups, and excellent people. So if you haven't joined them, you should look into it. All right, that's my long spiel.
What about you, Jake?
Well, I'm Kodabuki Jake. I am the co-host on Septum Sin vs. World, and well, I am also a movie collector and fan, and general. Just kind of come on and shoot the breeze with you guys on these channels, and one day I'll have time to do more. We'll see.
Okay. And I'm really looking forward to those nature videos eventually.
Eventually.
Heck yeah.
I'm brushing up
When
on
he
my-
goes around,
I'm rooting for him in a beehive costume somewhere down the road.
I'm waiting for him to go get bit by a box turtle and do a replay of Ernest Goes to Camp.
But in any case, my name is David Strege. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for taking this journey with us. I know we have had fun here. And I look forward to more thoughtful and deeply provocative or artistic films in the future. And hopefully you just check this film out eventually. But I also moonlight under a different channel, which I have been slacking on the reviews and the pickup videos, but I go under Delusions of Grandeur, where you can see some pickup videos, reviews of films, as I tend to get my thoughts out on them eventually. So thank you for slumming with us, and hopefully next week we'll have a biting experience with some of the films that we have lined up. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are, and don't think about going to any other channel. So
Thanks for the memories.
Go out and get yourself that Barton Fink feeling and bring it back to us.
Indeed.